So let's be honest. You want to dive into woodworking and you make a quick and dirty crosscut sled for your table saw. And if it's anything like mine, maybe it's starting to lose its zero clearance. You're using clamps as a stop block. But come on, we're hobbyists, we're enthusiasts, we're makers. We can do better. So let's go. All right, so let's go ahead and get rolling. I got two pieces. This is just ball 2 birch plywood. And if I try to put them together, you see that there's a little bit of some cupping going on. But we want to put those together in a quote unquote oval shape, right? If that kind of makes sense. So I marked them on the inside parts, and I'm just going to spread the goo all over the place. Crazy. And that way, whenever they are glued and clamped into place, once they dry, they should be nice and flat, right? That's how we're going to get away with not having to plane the full length of the ply, because it doesn't really make sense. So we're going to proceed forward and clamp this guy. We're going to do that for the back fence and the front fence. And usually the girl next door has something to say about that.
It's all clamped up.
Outstanding. So now we're going to get started on the front fence. This is the part that I'm going to be grabbing on. And we're going to do the same thing, right? These are going to be a lot longer though. So I'm going to cut these on my table saw. And this is going to span the entire length of the sled. But I'm starting to feel something, a little something. Yeah, anybody can be a DJ if you truly believe. So check it out. Let's get back to it. And the glue has set overnight. The clamps did their job. And we reduced that bowing action of the plywood like we talked about earlier. So the next thing that I want to do is I need to get that edge nice and smooth. So let's go ahead and take it to the joiner. And I restored this guy. I had another video about that earlier. And I got the blades nice and sharp so that it can do the business that I needed to do. If you want to check that out, I would really appreciate it. But now that we got a nice, clean, straight edge, we want to take the jointed side and stick it on the table saw so that I have both edges so that I can attach it to the sled later on and have it be nice and flat. And all this prep work is just going to make it easier for me to get a good 90 on my crosscut sled later on. And we'll lob off the yucky edges on the miter saw, and then we'll talk about our IKEA shopping. Now, while I was strolling through, I noticed this Vigda rail. And notice that it looked really, really similar to a T-track. So let's talk about that.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Whew.
That's better. Is it? I don't know. Anyways. Give you safety. There's always time for safety, Rocco. There's a lot of hardware that goes with this little guy, and since it is like a curtain rod or whatever, we're just gonna get rid of that. Whoa, easy there. Big fella. Oh, shit. So, Vidga. Curtain thingy. It has a deep recess, and it's got a baby recess. The baby recess is what I want to use. And so, since this thing is just made out of aluminum, I'm gonna take this piece, because I don't need this whole thing for the span of the forward fence that I'm gonna be making repeatable cuts on. I just need a piece that'll go on both sides of the blade, right, the left and right. So the first cut I wanna do is take this to the miter saw, since this is just made out of aluminum, and just cut the piece off that I don't need, all the excess. We'll lob that off, no big deal. And then after that, we'll take this piece to the table saw and knock out these little fingers, so to speak, so that I can get this flat to be my T-track. And then, after I make my table saw cut, I'm going to take it back to the miter saw and cut the pieces that I need to go on either side of the blade whenever I'm ready to do my repeatable cuts on the Crosscut Sled. So here we go. I got my piece, right? It's cut down. Just a little note. When you're doing aluminum strips like this, the kickback from this didn't really scare me because I had a block to secure it towards the end. I had the feather board whenever I was feeding the whole piece before the cuts actually occurred. What really got me were all the chips, right? Wear gloves, because them kicking on my fingers Like, I'm not bleeding or anything, but it still kind of sucked. All right, now that we've processed our T-track, I want to go ahead and get my router table set up. Now, this thing is beefy. I got this off the side of the road. You talk about trash to cash. If you're a fan of my channel, you know what's up. I also got a video about how I talk about getting tools and equipment on the cheap. So give that a look if you would be so kind. But going further with the fence, right? The back and the front fence. I want to make sure that I set everything up and get everything real nice and ergonomic. So the first thing that I want to do is create a roundover. That way, the back side of the fence, not really a big deal. It's kind of more for aesthetics, but the front side of the fence is what I'm going to be handling a lot. So I want to make sure that it is well-rounded and smooth. So I want to take a sander to it. And I just used 120 grit and then just polished it off with a greenie, right? Just a Scotch-Brite. After that, what I'm going to do is I want to get the T-track ready to be inserted into the front fence. Now, this thing is 15 millimeters wide, and that equates to a little over a half an inch, right? It's Vidga, so millimeters, metric. Unfortunately, my half-inch router bit it's broken. I broke the teeth somehow. It chipped off, the carbide chipped off, so that's kind of a bust. So I'm gonna have to use my 1/4 inch straight routing bit. And that's not a big deal. I'm just gonna make a few passes, right? Like I said, I'm gonna make a few passes on the right side, a few passes on the left side. That way I can recess my Vidga T-track into the front fence. That way I can get ready for stop block. All right, I wanted to give you a little bit of setup just so you know how I set up my router. So I got my 1/4 inch bit right there, and I made a little template just to show where the blade is gonna actually cut, right? So we wanna go through, cut over through here, stop. This is where the blade is gonna go, and then all the way to the other side. So using that, I'm gonna use my jointed edge that I didn't round over, butt up against the fence. But where do I stop, right? So whenever I come in through here, I'll be set up, buzz, 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 buzz. And then I'll know once I get to this line, right, this is where I wanna stop because the blade is gonna puncture right through here, and that's where my line ends. And then going forward to the other side, I want to plunge it up to the other edge of where the blade is going to be, plunge it in, and then all the way through this way, and then repeat as I raise the blade up the other way, and then we'll get ready to roll. We're in the final stages of completion here. We got the back fence, we got the front fence, situated, routed out with a T-track. All we got to do now is focus on the bed. Now, for those of you who frequent this channel, you already know what these are about. These are my homemade HDPE runners. And I'll leave a card in the ding dong up here. For those of you who don't know, by all means, check out my jugs video. Other than that, all I'm gonna do for the back fence is I'm just gonna put it on, right? Just gonna center it. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be square, just screwed and glued into place. For the front fence, the one that I'm gonna be manipulating, I don't wanna glue it into place, but I do wanna screw it.
Praising foe!
And I'm gonna screw it on a pivot point. So I'm gonna put a pivot right here in the front left so that I can square it up to my table saw blade. And there are various methods of figuring out how to do that online, on YouTube, woodworking forums. Figure out which one is the most conducive to how you learn and what just makes sense for you, and by all means, give that a run. The only thing left to do for the actual crosscut sled is to make the stop block. So I've got the T, I got the T-track. All I gotta do now is just cut a little groove with a piece of spare, I'll use bolted birch plywood. And I just wanna make the stop block and a little recess for the stop block to sit into the groove of the T-track as well as the nut. And as I'm going through this process, I'm just gonna cut a groove with my new Crosscut Sled. I'm gonna put the little groove block in there, and then I'm just gonna cut out a little spot for the T-track nut, the T-track bolt to recess into. That way I can maneuver it back and forth and everything is all well and good. And then I was ready to take it for a test drive. So I took a piece of scrap and I just made some repeatable cuts just to make myself happy. But also I put a piece of block on the front fence just to protect my fingers from the blade travel. But hey, I'm gonna go ahead and call this video here. Hopefully it inspires you to save a little bit of money whenever you're making your own T-tracks, whenever you're making your own crosscut sled. And if you wanna check out my other videos, I've got one where I furnished this whole one-car garage with tools. And if you wanna check out how I just maximize my space, go ahead and give that a go. Other than that, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace. Put a little indention, like a little, not a dado, because a dado is on the edge, isn't it? What is it called, a rabbet? I don't know. A groove. We're gonna cut a groove. In the groove. Anyways.